This video tests whether a psychology citation actually supports the political insult being made. Lucas, this is a nearly perfect example of using a legitimate psychology term to dress up a partisan insult as science. The 2002 Yale paper you're invoking is real. Leonid Rozenblit and Keil published The Misunderstood Limits of Folk Science, An Illusion of Explanatory Depth. So we've established that the paper exists. Now comes that annoying little part where we actually read what the fucking thing studied, because it doesn't say what you're telling your audience it says. The researchers studied whether people generally overestimate how deeply they understand causal systems. That's the basic idea behind the illusion of explanatory depth. You think you understand something, then somebody asks you to explain exactly how it works. Suddenly, you discover your understanding isn't nearly as deep as you thought it was. That's an interesting psychological phenomenon. It's also a human phenomenon. Lucas somehow managed to turn humans commonly overestimate their knowledge into Trump supporters are stupid. Science apparently took a detour somewhere between Yale and TikTok. Study 1 involved 16 Yale graduate students. They were asked about things like speedometers, zippers, flush toilets, cylinder locks, helicopters, quartz watches, and sewing machines. First, they rated how well they believed they understood these things. Then they had to explain how the mechanism actually worked, step by step. Then they rated their understanding again, and their confidence dropped. Once they were forced to explain the mechanism, they discovered holes in what they thought they knew. That's the experiment. Nobody asked them how they voted. Nobody showed them a Trump rally. Nobody measured how many hours of Fox News they watched. Nobody checked their MAGA hat collection. Study 2 replicated the effect with 33 Yale undergraduates. Study 3 tested students at a less selective university. The researchers actually considered whether elite students might simply be unusually intellectually arrogant. Interesting possibility. But the basic effect wasn't confined to Yale students. People tend to believe they understand complicated mechanisms better than they actually do. Again, people. Not conservatives, not Republicans, not Trump voters, humans. Apparently humanity wasn't partisan enough, so Lucas had to improve the research. Later experiments looked at natural phenomena, earthquakes, tides, comets, rainbows. Same basic result. People frequently think they understand causal mechanisms better than they actually do. And when they're forced to explain those mechanisms in detail, they become more aware of the gaps in their knowledge. That's useful psychology. It tells you something about human cognition. It doesn't magically identify which political party contains the stupid people. That part requires evidence Lucas never provided. Do you know what the 2002 paper didn't study? Trump supporters, whether conservatives are mediocre. In fact, searching the actual paper produces no occurrence of politic at all. So when Lucas tells his audience, here's why Trump supporters think they sound smart, that conclusion didn't come from Yale. It came from Lucas. This is where the argument falls apart. Yale demonstrates a general cognitive bias. Lucas attaches his bias to one political tribe. Okay. Where's the experiment connecting the two? Where are the Republican-Democratic comparison groups? Where are the intelligence measurements? Where are the controls? Where are the statistical results showing MAGA voters exhibit this bias more strongly than everybody else? They aren't there, because Lucas isn't reporting the study anymore. He's editorializing, which is perfectly legal. Just don't point at Yale while you're doing it and pretend Yale said it. Now, there actually was later research applying the illusion of explanatory depth to politics. Fernbach, Rogers, Fox, and Sloman published a 2013 study examining complex public policies. Participants often believed they understood policies better than they really did. When researchers asked them to explain how those policies actually worked, perceived understanding fell. the researchers who reported reductions in political extremity under certain conditions. Notice the language. People with political attitudes. Not Republicans are stupid. Not Democrats are stupid. Actual researchers have this annoying habit of limiting their conclusions to what their data can support. And because actual science is considerably less convenient than TikTok psychology, later researchers tried to replicate that political extremity finding. 3 pre-registered replication attempts published in 2021 failed to reproduce the key results that mechanistic explanation reduced political extremity. They did reproduce something important. People became more aware of gaps in their knowledge. That's how scientific literature works. You get findings, limitations, replication attempts, sometimes conflicting results. Science is messy because reality doesn't give a shit about your preferred political narrative. That's what scientific literature looks like. Findings, limitations, replications, conflicting results. Revision when the evidence demands it. What it doesn't look like is, I hate MAGA, therefore Yale proved MAGA is stupid. That's not science. That's an opinion with a citation attached to it. And attaching a research paper to an insult doesn't magically convert the insult into empirical evidence. And here comes my favorite part. Lucas tells us that when weak people run out of knowledge, they start insulting people. During the same 2-minute lecture, he calls Trump supporters stupid, weak, mediocre clowns. You really couldn't script this shit any better. He's lecturing millions of people about intellectual weakness while using insults as substitutes for evidence. Apparently, the psychological principle applies to everybody except the guy explaining the psychological principle. Convenient. Lucas even claims these people have been mediocre and taking shortcuts their entire lives. Really? Where was that measured? What study determined the lifetime work habits of Trump voters? What data set established their intellectual ability? What experiment compared MAGA voters with Democrats? What instrument measured weakness? Where's the mediocrity scale? Where's the control group? Where's the data? He didn't provide any. Those aren't scientific conclusions. They're insults. Here's where this becomes genuinely funny. Lucas accuses Trump supporters of memorizing talking points without understanding them. But look at what happened here. He learned a psychological concept. He stripped away the limitations of the research. He attached that concept to the political group he dislikes. Then he used scientific vocabulary to make the insult sound empirical. That looks suspiciously similar to the behavior he's accusing everybody else of. Confidence isn't evidence. Psychological terminology isn't evidence. A Yale citation isn't evidence for a conclusion Yale never reached. There's another problem. The publicly available background we previously examined establishes substantial experience for Lucas in marketing, technology, customer acquisition, business, and content creation. I found no public evidence establishing him as a licensed psychologist, clinical psychologist, psychiatrist, psychology professor, or author of peer-reviewed psychology research. That doesn't mean he can't talk about psychology. I'm not a psychologist either. You don't need permission from the psychology priesthood to read a research paper. But when you're making scientific claims, the research has to carry your argument. Here, it doesn't. So let's actually use the lesson from Rozenblit and Keil. Lucas claims Trump supporters memorize talking points and collapse when somebody asks follow-up questions. Fine. Pick one. Pick an actual Trump policy. Immigration, tariffs, NATO, taxes, Ukraine, regulation, energy, whatever you want. State the specific proposition. Then explain the mechanism. Then provide your evidence. Then let somebody challenge it. And I'll do the same. That would actually resemble a test of explanatory depth. That's the discussion I'm interested in. Give me an actual proposition. Give me evidence. Give me mechanisms. Give me numbers. Give me something that can be challenged. If Trump's wrong, demonstrate that Trump's wrong. If his supporters are wrong about something, demonstrate that they're wrong. Calling millions of people stupid, weak, mediocre, and clowns while standing in front of a psychology citation isn't psychological analysis. It's partisan shit-talking wearing a lab coat. And apparently the lab coat came from the marketing department. This is The Unmaking of the American Citizen by Shawn Armstrong. It's a political and cultural diagnosis of what's happened to the American idea of citizenship over the last century. Shawn Armstrong argues that the country changed regimes without changing its constitution, moving from progressivism to the New Deal order, then to neoliberalism, identity politics, and the Great Awakening. If you want a serious critique with a clear conservative argument behind it, this book gets straight to work. The core argument is simple and brutal. America kept the shell of the Constitution, but changed the way the regime operates. Instead of equal citizenship, we got expanding bureaucracy, cultural management, and institutions that classify people by identity groups. Shawn Armstrong shows how the promise of fairness and freedom turned into something else. Hollowed out communities, growing despair, and a permanent fight between approved victims and approved villains. The book maps the road clearly. First comes progressivism and the New Deal order, where centralized management becomes normal. Then comes neoliberalism, which uses global markets, free trade, and permanent war to reshape the country and weaken the middle class. Then comes identity politics and the Great Awakening, where equal citizenship gets replaced by a moral hierarchy of victim and oppressor. Shawn Armstrong treats this as a regime story, not random chaos. This book is not just a complaint. It makes a case for conservative renewal. Shawn Armstrong argues for recovering equal citizenship under the law, relearning Republican virtue, reviving Christian and natural law traditions, and building local institutions that can outlast failing national systems. He also tells conservatives to stop apologizing for who they are and to start defending the rights and duties of citizenship without flinching. This book is aimed at readers who feel the ground shifted beneath the country and want more than bumper sticker politics. It's for conservatives, Christians, independents, and anybody else who's tired of being handled like a demographic category. If you want a readable explanation of how we got here and a conservative answer that goes beyond complaining, this book fits. Shawn Armstrong is a retired U.S. Army veteran, lifelong student of history, and prolific author whose work spans military affairs, politics, economics, religion, martial arts, American history, and the unexplained. Drawing on more than 2 decades of military service and a lifetime of study, Armstrong writes with clarity, discipline, and practical judgment. His books form a lasting record of the knowledge he has earned through experience, research, and reflection, created to inform readers, challenge assumptions, and pass something worthwhile to the next generation. If you want to understand how America moved from citizenship to bureaucratic management and identity politics, scan the QR code or use the Amazon link and grab The Unmaking of the American Citizen. This is a serious political book with a clear conservative answer. Shawn Armstrong has put the work on the page. Now you can put it in your hands. Tired of political commentary that sounds like it was assembled by a committee of frightened interns? Then listen to Shawn thinking out loud. This is a news-driven political commentary with a spine. No fake radio cheerfulness, no corporate mush, no pretending every bad argument deserves a participation trophy. Just Shawn Armstrong behind the microphone, breaking down politics, culture, history, media narratives, and public stupidity with evidence, discipline, and a complete lack of patience for nonsense. The show starts where serious commentary should start, with the claim. What are people saying? What actually happened? What's proven? What's speculation? What are they leaving out? Then Shawn walks through the facts, the context, the hypocrisy, and the consequences. The goal isn't to entertain lazy outrage. The goal is to separate reality from slogan confetti, which is now apparently an endangered civic skill. Shawn Armstrong brings the voice of a retired Army infantry staff sergeant, published author, martial arts instructor, and political commentator. That matters because the show isn't built around fashionable panic or weak little both sides cowardice. It's built around discipline, evidence, direct language, and the old-fashioned idea that adults should be able to defend their claims without hiding behind buzzwords, memes, or emotional blackmail. Shawn Thinking Out Loud covers politics, culture, history, national identity, institutional failure, military logic, martial arts, faith, economics, and the public arguments people keep butchering in real time. It's not noise for the sake of noise. The show is built to clarify what matters, expose what's dishonest, and drag weak arguments into daylight where they can stop pretending to be profound. This is not another safe little show where everyone talks about the issue, flatters the audience, and pretends cowardice is nuance. If a claim is stupid, it gets called stupid. If a narrative is dishonest, it gets exposed. If an argument is weak, Shawn doesn't pat it on the head and send it home with a juice box. Facts don't need permission to be rude. Shawn Armstrong is not only talking into a microphone, he's a published author whose work covers politics, history, theology, military fiction, self-defense, martial arts, and civic argument. That range gives the show teeth. You're not getting a script read by someone who discovered politics last Thursday because a trending hashtag scared them. You're getting commentary from someone who's been writing, arguing, teaching, and studying the structure behind these issues for years. Listen when you want your arguments sharper. Listen when the headline smells wrong, the meme is doing too much work, or the public conversation has once again been dragged behind the barn by people allergic to evidence. Shawn Thinking Out Loud is for listeners who want to think cleaner, argue better, and spot manipulation before it crawls into the feed wearing a halo. Search Shawn Thinking Out Loud here on YouTube. Follow the show, play the latest episode, share it with someone whose politics could use adult supervision. Shawn Thinking Out Loud. News, politics, culture, history, and commentary without the padded helmet. Listen on YouTube.